Welcome everybody to episode 4. I can't believe that already. These weeks are flying by of Tech Talk with the founders. So hopefully you've enjoyed the first 3 that we've released. That we release every Wednesday, just to let you know, every Wednesday, both on LinkedIn and on YouTube. Those are the only exclusive platforms where you can find this content. But hey, I've got to say thank you to everyone who's come back to us saying that they've liked it, they saw it, they found it informative, it was really good, and they're looking out for the next episode. So thank you for your comments. They're very much appreciated. And obviously we're going to keep doing this. So once again, if there's something that you would like to see on these podcasts, and obviously we cover everything from the topics of business, technology, strategy, and process mapping. Those are our 4 pillars that we will cover. Maybe in the future there may be something else, who knows? But for now, those are the 4 pillars that we tend to cover off. So if there's something that you would like us to be talking about, please obviously send us a message through LinkedIn or on YouTube. But once again, thank you so much for your support so far. You can always be a little bit nervous with these things, but I really believe that the best way to know a business is to get to know the people in the business. This is probably the best platform to be able to do that. So today, we only have one of the founders. I know it says, Tech Talks with the founders, but today we only have one. But I'm sure Tom will be more than enough today to talk about what we wanted to go through in terms of the topic of the week. And the topic of the week that we're going to be talking about is cyber security. Yeah, I know. And if you haven't been under a rock in the last week, okay, if you've been so blasé not to watch the news, okay, you would have heard that Santander had a cyber attack. Okay, now, I think when someone says cyber attack on, an NHS, you may not think about it too much. Cyber attack on Ticketmaster, you're like, well, I didn't buy Taylor Swift tickets anyway, so I really don't care, right? But if you say a bank got hacked, if you say that data got breached at a bank, 30 million customers and staff had their details hacked, okay? Now, luckily, the UK was not affected, but this is something that we all have to pay attention to because it's going to affect everybody. Whether you buy tickets on Ticketmaster, that was 560 people's data got breached, allegedly stolen, with a ransom of 400,000. So your details are not sold to the dark web. And I think, I heard on recent reports they're trying to sell the Santander data for 2 million. That's the ransom they've got here. So this is real serious stuff. And, we talked about banks, we talked about leisure industries, and we talked about the NHS. That recently got breached to the point where, obviously, patients couldn't even have their operations because of the data breaches that happened over in Chelsea and Westminster. And not only recently, we had something happen in Scotland. So this is real serious scenarios. And look, we're all using tech. All our data's on tech. For those who are on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and TikTok and the list goes on, all right? All your data's out there. All your data's out there. And, we are assuming that all our data is safe. So I thought, what an interesting topic to talk about cybersecurity, and how that affects us, how that affects you as a business. If you're a business owner watching this, how does that affect you? And, what should you be doing to mitigate some of those threats? So listen, first question I had, Tom, it's a big topic and we're going to try and squeeze it into the 10 minutes here. But first question should really be, should we be worried about our data being stolen? Or is this just one of those news stories that, someone's got to sell the papers, haven't they? And if there's not a war, then we're going to talk about cyber attack. So first, in the first instance, is this something that everyone, business, individual, should be worried about?
Yeah, well, yeah.
In a nutshell.
I was trying to think of a better way to frame that, but unfortunately, yeah, I think it is a real problem. And in fact, those examples that you gave, I would suggest, are the minority of what gets publicized. I think the vast majority of incidents. Yeah, if you're a company and you get hacked, the last thing you want to do is that ends up in the media because the public the confidence that will get lost, in those organisations, and perhaps rightly so, especially when you're dealing with bank information. Should we be worried about our data being stolen? I think I was going to say only to the extent that you can do anything about it. There's who hasn't been spam called by somebody and they say, because you didn't opt out of this and that, but I think there's not many people that won't have had some details leaked at some point in their lives by this point.
Oh, okay.
So let's face it head on. The reality is not good at the moment, but that's a start.
Yeah, that's a starting point. So here's a question, right? Here's a scenario. I wanted to go into cybersecurity, what that actually means in hackers. We're going to go into that question in a second. So the thing is, we all been affected, but obviously it's not out there in the public domain as much, because obviously a lot of companies will want to keep that secret as much as possible. But I suppose when you're Santander and there's a hack and the NHS, and everyone's going to know, right? These are, these are huge conglomerates, worldwide businesses. But, you always think, well, hold on. I went onto the website and there was that little lock on the side screen. Surely I'm safe. As long as I get that little lock, that yellow lock in the side, I'm okay. All right. So why is that not enough now?
Well,
actually, hold on. Before we say why that's not enough, I'm jumping the gun. What are hackers? Who are these hackers? Who are these people that are stealing the data? And what is this cybersecurity? What does it even mean? And then we'll go back to that lock.
All right.
So I'm interested.
We'll circle back around to that. And it's obviously, as with everything in technology, right? It's a really broad definition. Cybersecurity. It covers so many. It covers so many things. So what's a hacker? Hacker really is just a term that's become used, and hacker doesn't even have anything necessarily to do with cybersecurity. It's just a term that's come to be associated with it. Actually, the hacker come from somewhere else. But if we're talking about attack vectors, for example, so I think that's a really interesting one. So what are different attack vectors for different systems? And you're looking at things so obviously an information breach is one of those, but how does that information get breached, right? So that might be through somebody broken into a system, and there are different methods for doing that. So there's things like cracking for if you want to get a password, or you could do a brute force attack. You might do a man in the middle attack if you're going to intercept some information, present yourself to the end user as if you're the real source.
That happens a lot, right? That's a common method.
That can happen more often than you think. And then you've got common ones that you hear about, like denial of service attacks, where actually the resource itself, the server itself, gets taken down because somebody overwhelms the servers effectively with a lot of traffic. So kind of like, if you can't have it, nobody can have it. So kind of scenario.
I see.
There's a lot of different scenarios that sort of comes underneath that umbrella. But then we can we can expand out from that. So I was going to go into the whole so there's a good analogy. It might not be a perfect analogy, but you can just kind of think of it as your house, right? So your house, there's lots of different ways to break into your house. Somebody could try and break down the front door. Somebody could try and go into a window and things like that. But then, and you hinted on it with the padlock, right? So what can we do to secure our house? What can we do to secure our information a bit better? And there are different strategies. So we can talk a bit more about the different strategies, if you like.
I think that's really important. Yeah, because obviously, look, one of the things that we wanted to do with this podcast is help small businesses, or individuals, right? So even if, and we always said this, even if you're not a client, okay, we want to be able to offer you value. That's just one of our ethos as a business. We want to make the world a better place. So definitely, we can get onto that. So I've understood what hackers are, and they're not necessarily associated to cybersecurity, but they have become associated. And we know what they do. There's 3 different ways of doing that.
And think about it so a hacker, it could represent a private person just having a bit of fun in a system. Hacking for the sake of it as a challenge. More often than not these days, you hear about state-sponsored hacking, which is, sort of goes towards the cyber warfare end of the spectrum. If we're sort of classifying a hack as in terms of, are they after information or they're after infrastructure? So sometimes on the news
Yeah.
you might hear about power stations being hacked or utility networks being hacked.
Oh, okay.
And typically that's state sponsored. But in these kind of scenarios where you've got people's information's being breached from a system, probably somebody's going to go and try and sell it on the dark web for a sum of money, because that's all it's about. At the end of the day, they're trying to get your information because it's valuable to somebody else.
Big data.
Well, and then it gets used. And then it gets used for nefarious purposes like identity theft. So if somebody can get enough information about you, then somebody could pretend to be you, take out a loan, and so forth.
Okay. So we've got all these. Yeah, go on, carry on.
No, I was just going to. So let's get into the different bits of it, because there's. Appreciate we'll try and keep it short on time, and hopefully I won't be speaking too quickly here because there's a lot to cover. But there's different layers, and you mentioned the padlock. And so there's different layers. There's infrastructure, which we've just touched upon. You've got communications between systems. You've got applications that then sit on those systems. So there are different strategies for securing those pieces of information, or the systems themselves. So going back to the house analogy, you might think of your front door. You've got a key, and once you get into your house, you can access all parts of your house, right? So there's that kind of secure shell. Another probably bad analogy, or another useful analogy, might be that you can think of security as kind of like an onion. You're adding layers, right? And each one of those sort of architectural layers of infrastructure, communications, and applications, you're applying these different security mechanisms at each layer. So it all builds up. But that's the part of the problem, is that if there's a weakness anywhere in that stack or anywhere across any of those verticals, that can have ripple effects. And it only takes one weakness in the system to be able to reach that system. So, then you want to be able to do things like, well, actually, can we make that system more secure? So I don't just need a key to get in, but actually, I'm only going to allow you to get into certain rooms. Do you only you'd only give somebody a key if they wanted to get into your house, but you might give them another key if you want to let them to your lounge or your bedroom, or if you wanted them to watch TV. So you've got that's sort of a concept.
I have that with my kids. They're only allowed into one room in the house.
That's it. It's kind of
that's called parental security, not cyber security.
Well, but that's part of it. It's all of that comes under authorization. It's called authorization and authentication. So, are you allowed to access the system? And once you've accessed the system, what are you allowed to do with that system? Then you can look at things like encryption, which is very important. So, tie that back to the padlock you said on when you see on the website. That's really important. That when you're communicating the information, it's encrypted. So you've logged onto a system, you've authenticated yourself with a system. So the system, i.e., let's say the bank, you're logging onto your bank, you put in your username and password. So you've authenticated who you say you are. You're authorized only to access your accounts. But all of that communication backwards and forwards between you is done. It's encrypted, right, using cryptographic methods. And that means that anybody listening to that information can't easily break it, right? Let's say it's for all practical intents and purposes, it's impossible to break. So the padlock is really important, but that is only one very small part of the overall picture.
So cybersecurity then is literally like the security of your house. I love the analogy. I think that was a perfect analogy, actually. And there's different layers to that security. So here's a question. This is just off topic. Well, it's actually on topic. But I'm a company with billions of dollars, pounds, euros, whatever, like Santander, right? How did I get hacked then? If I've got these onions that you mentioned and circles of security that I'm looking at, how does this, these individuals, how did I go against a mammoth of a company who you think they're spending millions, if not more, hundreds of millions on security? How did they get a breach? How does someone get into those levels of onion that you just mentioned? How does that happen?
Well, partly I think it's because of complexity. The larger your organization, the more complex it is. I don't want to point the finger particularly at the human operators, but a large number of problems with systems, is human error. One of the most successful if you've heard of social engineering, right? One of the most successful attack vectors for any system is the operator of the system. So if you can convince if you can phone up somebody at Santander and convince them that you're somebody who should have access to something, and they give you that access, then it doesn't matter what security they've got. Technical security, you've managed to circumvent that. So that's one way. Complexity of systems. When you've got so many different systems, just keeping everything up to date, like you say, is a mammoth task. And one particularly good attack vector is if there are outdated or components of that system with known vulnerabilities. So if a software company that's way down in the software stack releases a security update and you haven't updated it, those vulnerabilities are well known. So there will be people that will they'll have software running all the time, probing these systems constantly for these known vulnerabilities. And again, you only need to find one entrance.
That's incredible.
And you can get in, and from there you can get to another system. So
it's
obviously it's not trivial. It's certainly not trivial,
no.
right? These are very
100%. So we've got two more questions. So how does one guard themselves against their data being stolen? How do you, or is there anything you can do? Because I said, I know I may jest about the lock, but in simplistic terms, I do look for that. Right? That's one way. But is there a way that companies can guard themselves against that, or individuals even? So you might be an individual watching this, and you're like, I don't have a business. How can I guard myself against, having my own data on the dark web? I'm just putting it out there for anyone who watches this video. You can steal my data. There's no money. So I'm just really not the person you want to be chasing. I thought I'd just put that out there, once I have the opportunity, and I don't know who will see this. All right. But no, on a serious note, how can we protect ourselves? How can we protect ourselves?
Security starts with the individual. I think the more individuals, people generally have an idea, then the more secure generally things will be, right? So and you've mentioned the padlock, right? Make sure the system that you're talking to has that little encryption lock that you show up in your browser. Make sure that you're using secure passwords. So the National Cybersecurity Centre in the UK recommends a 3 random word pattern. So it's more about the length of the password than just a string of random letters and numbers. That can be
okay.
Try and use a different password for every system. If you can use a password manager app, that's great. So something like LastPass or 1Password and various other apps are available. That's a really good way. So you're not having to you don't want to use the same password for every system. You don't want to just have them written down somewhere in an unsecure file. So a password app is great, and they will also help you generate new passwords and log into systems that you're using. Where possible now, use multi-factor authentication. So that might be, again, you might have an authenticator app on your phone that allows you to type in a code. So you type in your username and password, but then you've got to do another one-time code to log in. You might get an SMS from some systems.
Yeah, we do that with Salesforce,
so,
right?
Well, exactly, and that then bubbles up to the company level. So the security standards now really sort of mandate. I mean, it's recommendation, but it's to a certain extent there's legislation around this as well. So as a company, you should be providing all those capabilities to your customers, and certainly banks will do, right? Whatever bank you use these days, they're all using some form of multi-factor authentication. So that's all good. I think if you're a company, then there are things to look at. So there's something called the Open Worldwide Application Security Project, OWASP, which is a list. They keep a list every year of like the 10 top vulnerabilities of systems. So that's a good place. That's really a good place to start with those. And then on top of that, there are standards. So there are security standards that you really should be adhering to. For example, as there are ISO standards like ISO 27001, which is about information security management systems. And it's all about making sure that you as a company are following best practices, right? Because unfortunately, there is no panacea. But if you're following the most up to date, the best practices, all your systems are updated and so forth, then you're making it as hard as possible. Because at the end of the day, if somebody wants to break into your house and you've got the most secure front door ever, well, they can just go through a window. But you're
Yeah.
making it so that your house is less attractive to break into than somebody else's house. And
Someone
it
else's
kind of
house.
applies to security. But these
Yeah.
things all do provide a layer of real security. And things like, I don't want to sort of give the impression that there's always an entrance, right? So there are, and increasingly there are very good mathematical ways of preventing it, right? And asymmetric encryption is still one of the best tools that we have. And it
Yeah.
really is the thing that the internet is underpinned by these. We wouldn't have anything online if it wasn't for asymmetric encryption. So really making sure that you've done all of that, right? You've followed all the standards and all the best practices. And then if you want
Yeah.
if you want to be trusted, which is a whole another level on top of that, then ideally you want to be being, or as a company, you want to be being audited by a trusted third party. You could then ask the question of who audits the auditors, right? Which is fair enough. But
Yeah.
if you're being audited based on some of those standards and you can be shown to be compliant with those standards, then your customers can trust you, because part of those standards also mandate, going back to the original point about Santander or whoever else has been hacked recently, what should you do in the event of a breach? And there are very specific criteria that should be followed when there's an event of a breach. So, for example, one of the first things is you should notify the Information Commissioner's Office if you're in the UK or operating in the UK.
Yeah.
And that makes sure that somebody else knows what's happening. Authorities are aware of what's happening, but you've also got a clear process in place for, okay, if we get breached, this is what happens, and the various other activities and processes that then follow on from that.
Fantastic. And what we'll do for everybody, I'll make sure in the notes of this that some of the things that Tom has discussed of how you can go about protecting yourselves as an individual, but also protecting yourself as a company. We'll just put some links that, Tom mentioned some links where you can have a look at that. So we'll make sure that we'll put them in the notes. So final question, just to close this off then. So what is everywhere doing then to protect itself from hackers? What are we doing in the cyber security world to make sure that we're okay? Because we are a tech business, right?
Yeah.
So what are we doing?
Well, we're doing all the things that I've just described to a greater or lesser extent, right? So it's making sure that we are up to date with the latest security standards. It's making sure that making sure that our code is secure by design, making sure that all our systems are up to date and that we're removing known vulnerabilities. So going through the OWASP top 10 list and making sure that we haven't fallen foul of any of those sort of common areas, making sure infrastructure is secure, and obviously everything's on the cloud these days. So making sure that your cloud infrastructure is secure, making sure that your supply chain is also secure. So, for example, if we want to be compliant with certain security standards, we also have to make sure our supply chain is compliant with our security standards. And then we're going through the processes with various different standards to make sure that we're being audited on a regular basis, so that we can hold our hands up and say we're doing the absolute best that we can to the latest standards, so that our customers have confidence that we're doing what has been recommended by security professionals.
Fantastic. So if you're working with us, you can be secure that we're doing our utmost to make sure that we are not Santander. Okay. No. But look, the truth is, what we understand is that if someone really wants to get in your house, there are different ways to get in. But our job is to make our house, the hardest one on the street to get into. And that's what we're doing everywhere. So I think that's really good. Tom, I've got to say thank you, because obviously, there's a lot of news about cybersecurity, but, sometimes you can go over your head, what does that actually mean? All I know, my data has been stolen, but what can I do to protect myself? How, what does the world look like in 10 years when we're more online than ever before, virtual worlds and
AI,
all kinds of things, AI, right? So all this is happening. So we've got to pay attention. So, I just really want to say thank you again, Tom. So, if I didn't mention Tom Screen is one of the co-founders and technical director at Everywhere. And if you wanted to know more, and if please send us a message, and I'm sure Tom will be happy to answer those. And once again, you don't have to be a client to do that. We're just here to help in any shape or form. We're here to help. But we would really like, obviously, if you have some topics that you'd like to talk about, something that you saw in the news, anything around technology, but even maybe some of the things that we're going to start talking about is business. What is it like running a business, a tech business in the world of tech? So there may be some aspiring entrepreneurs out there looking at what that look like. What does that look like? How does that feel? So we're going to be, discussing, dipping into so many different areas, as I mentioned, the 4 pillars of the areas that we talk about. But if you like this, once again, subscribe, especially on our YouTube channel. So you make sure that you get these videos every Wednesday. And once again, they are posted every Wednesday. Please like it as well. That, gives us great confidence that we're doing the right thing. We're going in the right direction. So like and subscribe, as we always like to say. And obviously send any information over that you want us to discuss about in the future. But until then, thank you so much. Have an incredible week in terms of whatever you're doing. The sun is coming out. I don't know how often I'll be able to say that in these episodes, but the sun is coming out. Yes, you can look up. The sun's coming out there, Tom. It is coming out. So once again, these videos are out every Wednesday. So make sure you subscribe either or look for these on LinkedIn or subscribe on YouTube. See you guys soon.